Good afternoon to everyone. Today's hearing will examine the problem of India's missing girls. While for most of us today our attention is drawn to the unfolding crisis in Syria, as a matter of fact, I began this morning on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program and yesterday introduced a resolution calling for the establishment of a Syrian War Crimes Tribunal. Other atrocities continue unabated around the world. We cannot ignore these atrocities, among the most egregious of which is violation of human rights of the girl child and women in India. Women in India are confronted with a compounding crisis. By most estimates, there are tens of millions of women missing in India due to the devaluation of female life beginning in the womb. Sex selection abortion and female infanticide have led to lopsided sex ratios. In parts of India, for example, 126 boys are born for every 100 girls. This in turn leads to a shortage of marriageable women, which then leads to trafficking in persons, bride selling, and prostitution. I point out, as prime sponsor of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, we have seen the consequences of the missing girls play out with devastating consequences, not only in India, but in the People's Republic of China as well. Perhaps the best figures we have concerning the magnitude of the problem come from India's 2011 census figures, which finds that there are approximately 37 million more men than women in India. Indeed, Prime Minister Singh has addressed this issue head-on, stating, and I quote him in pertinent part, "The falling child sex ratio is an indictment of our social values." He says improving this ratio is not merely a question of stricter compliance with existing laws. What is more important is how we view and value the girl child in our society. It is a national shame for us that despite this, female feticide and infanticide continue in many parts of our country, close quote. Even when they are not killed outright, either in the womb or just before birth, the bias against girl children manifests itself in situations where family resources are limited and little food is available, in boys being fed before girls, leading to greater incidence of malnutrition among girls and a mortality rate that is 75% higher for girls below the age of 5 than for boys. The desire for a male child can be so great that there is a trend towards sex change operations for girls between the ages of 1 and 5, a process known as genitoplasty. Each year, hundreds of girls reportedly are pumped with hormones and surgically altered to turn them into facsimile boys. India's National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights has correctly stated that this highly unethical procedure is a violation of children's rights, as well as a perpetuation of the age-old preference for boys and biases against the girl child. But the roots of the present problem lie not only with cultural factors, but also misbegotten policy decisions, including population control policies that were hatched in the United States, and as a matter of fact, right here in Washington, which have had a disproportionately negative impact on India's women. We will learn from our witnesses that this includes policies advanced by the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, and funded by foundations such as the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, and abetted by non-governmental organizations such as the Population Council and the International Planned Parenthood Federation. During the debate in the U.S. House of Representatives on a bill to ban sex selection abortion, I noted that for most of us, "It's a girl" is cause for enormous joy, happiness, and celebration. But in many countries, including our own, it could be a death sentence. Today, the three most dangerous words in India and China are, "It's a girl." One witness today, Dr. Matthew Connolly, and his book, Fatal Misconception, The Struggle to Control World Population, traces the sordid history of sex selection abortion as a means of population control. In her book, Unnatural Selection, Choosing Boys Over Girls and the Consequences of a World Full of Men, Mara Wiesenthal elaborates, and I quote in part, "By August of 1969, when the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development and the Population Council convened another workshop on population control, sex selection had become a pet scheme. She goes on, sex selection, moreover, had the added advantage of reducing the number of potential mothers. If a reliable sex determination technology could be made available to a mass market, there was a rough consensus that sex selection abortion would be an effective, uncontroversial, and ethical way of reducing the global population. Fewer women, fewer mothers, fewer future children. At the conference, she goes on to say, one abortion zealot, Christopher Tizzi, co-presented sex selection abortion as one of the 12 new strategies representing the future of global birth control. Planned Parenthood honored Christopher Tizzi 4 years later with the Margaret Sanger Award. And of course, she wrote the book Child Limitation, and another book which I read called The Pivot of Civilization. In chapter 5, it was entitled The Cruelty of Charity, and makes the case as to why pregnant poor women should not get prenatal care, because you get more of those kinds of people who don't meet certain criteria. And I've read the book twice. It is a devastating indictment, and it's certainly comported with the eugenists of her time. Wiesenthal writes that today, and I quote her again, there are over 160 million females missing from Asia's population. That's more than the entire population of the United States of America, female population that is. And gender imbalance, which is mainly the result of sex-selective abortion, is no longer strictly an Asian problem. In Azerbaijan and Armenia, in Eastern Europe, and even among some groups in the U.S., couples are making sure that at least one of their children is a son. So many parents now select for boys that they have skewed the sex ratio at birth of the entire world. In the global war against baby girls, renowned AEI demographer Nicholas Eberstadt wrote in the New Atlantis, and I quote him, "Over the past 3 decades, the world has come to witness an ominous and entirely new form of gender discrimination, sex-selective feticide implemented through the practice of surgical abortion with the assistance of information gained through prenatal gender determination technology. All around the world, the victims of this new practice are overwhelmingly female. In fact, almost universally female. The practice has become so ruthlessly routine in many contemporary societies that it has impacted the very population structures, warping the balance between male and female births and consequently skewing the sex ratios for the rising generation towards a biologically unnatural excess of males," close quote. Many European countries, including the United Kingdom, as well as several Asian countries, actually ban sex selection abortion. Even 4 states in America, Arizona, Illinois, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania, proscribe it. Sex selection abortion is cruel and discriminatory and legal. It is violence against women. Most people in and out of government remain woefully unaware of the fact that sex selection abortion was a violent, nefarious, and deliberate policy, again, that was foisted upon us by the population control movement. While India has taken steps to curb these practices, indeed passing a law to ban sex-selective abortion and temper cultural facts such as the need for brides to provide a high dowry that contribute to parents looking at their daughters as a liability, these laws are largely, or irregularly, I should say, enforced. Moreover, there are laws at the state level which exacerbate the problem, mandating that parents only have 2 children, penalizing those who exceed this number, and denying benefits. This leads inevitably to sex-selective abortion, and particularly in poorer areas, female infanticide, and as parents will opt to have a son over a daughter, especially when their first child is a daughter. We hope that this hearing will help us better understand how we can play a role in curbing such horrific practices and abuses against the girl child and women. What, for example, can we do to ensure that companies based in the U.S., such as General Electric, whose ultrasound equipment is used to determine the sex of the child in utero, take steps to prevent that what should be a tool to promote life of both mother and child from being used as an instrument of death? Given the past role of U.S. agencies such as USAID in coercive population control policies, What oversight do we need to conduct to make sure that such abuses do not creep their way into existing programs? Similarly, to what extent are organizations that receive funding from the United States government implicated in such practices? What role can our State Department play beyond compiling information regarding what is occurring in India with respect to what some have labeled gendercide, to influence positively the Indian government so its reform laws and policies that exacerbate skewed sex ratios such as two-child per couple laws? By shining a light on what is happening in India with its missing girls, we hope to move forward towards a world where every woman is valued and deeply respected because of her intrinsic dignity, and where every child is welcomed regardless of his or her sex. I yield to my good friend, Dr. Burr.